Jake Turner wiped the sweat from his forehead as his cargo hauler docked at the station. It was supposed to be a quick stop. Fuel up, grab some rations, maybe catch a few hours of sleep before the next run. Nothing special. Just another forgotten outpost orbiting a dying red star that barely lit up the darkness anymore. But something felt wrong the moment he stepped off his ship. The air had this heavy feeling to it, like the whole station was holding its breath. Jake had been hauling cargo across the outer rim for 7 years now, and he'd learned to trust his gut. Right now, his gut was telling him to fuel up fast and get out. He should have listened. The refueling dock was near the main plaza, and as Jake walked past, he heard it. Laughter. Not the good kind either. The cruel kind that makes your skin crawl. He told himself to keep walking. Whatever was happening in that plaza wasn't his business. He had deliveries to make, credits to earn, and his own problems to worry about. But his feet stopped moving anyway. Jake turned and looked through the archway into the auction plaza. His stomach dropped. He'd heard stories about these places, but seeing one with his own eyes was different. Cages lined the walls. Inside them were people. Well, beings. Aliens from a dozen different species, all crammed together like cargo waiting to be shipped. A slaver station. He was on a slaver station. Jake's hands balled into fists. Slavery was illegal in human space. Had been for centuries. But out here, past the coalition borders, past the protection of Earth's fleet, the law was whatever the station boss said it was. And apparently, here, buying and selling people was just another business transaction. He should have turned around right then. Should have walked back to his ship, finished refueling, and jumped to the next system. But then he saw her. She was small. Too small. A Felina, one of those cat-like aliens from the Andara colonies. Jake had met a few Felina traders before, proud people with fur that shimmered in the light and these expressive ears that showed exactly what they were feeling. This girl couldn't have been more than 10 years old by human standards. Her orange and white fur was dirty and matted, her clothes were torn, and her ears were pressed so flat against her head that they almost disappeared. 2 Zenthari slavers had her by the arms, dragging her toward the auction block. She was crying. Not loud, dramatic crying. Quiet, hopeless sobs that somehow felt worse. Like she'd already given up. One of the slavers said something in their clicking language and the other one laughed. A crowd had gathered to watch. Most of them looked bored. This was entertainment to them. Just another day at the market. Jake's feet carried him closer before his brain could stop them. He pushed through the crowd until he was near the front. Close enough to see the girl's face. Her eyes were this bright amber color, but they looked dull now. Empty. The auctioneer, a massive 4-armed Kragath, climbed onto the platform. His voice boomed across the plaza, speaking in Galactic Common so everyone could understand. Next item. Young Felina female, approximately 12 standard cycles. Fully trained in domestic service. Enhanced empathic abilities make her ideal for pleasure services or emotional companion work. Jake's jaw clenched so hard he thought his teeth might crack. Enhanced empathic abilities. That meant she could feel emotions from others. The Felina were known for it. But for slavers, that gift became a curse. She could sense every dark thought, every cruel intention from anyone who came near her. No wonder she looked so broken. Defective emotional control, the auctioneer continued with a dismissive wave. Cries frequently. But easily corrected with proper discipline. Opening bid, 12,000 credits. 12,000. Jake's heart sank. He had maybe 3,000 in his personal account. The rest was tied up in his ship, his cargo contracts, his business. There was no way he could afford that kind of money. The crowd murmured. 12,000 was apparently too much for damaged goods. Jake watched the girl's shoulders shake as she sobbed harder. She knew what was happening. Knew she was being discussed like a broken appliance nobody wanted to buy. One of the slavers grabbed her by the ear and yanked her head up. "Stop crying, animal," he snarled. The girl let out a small whimper of pain but tried to muffle her sobs. The crowd laughed. And something inside Jake Turner snapped. He'd been a good man once. Back before the shipping company he worked for went bankrupt. Before he lost his position, his reputation, his fiancée. Before he ended up out here in the lawless territories, scraping by on cargo runs that barely covered fuel costs. Life had beaten the idealism out of him years ago. Or so he thought. Jake pulled out his data pad with shaking hands. He accessed his accounts. Personal savings, 3,200 credits. Business account, 8,000. Not enough. He scrolled further. His ship. The Wandering Star. His home, his livelihood, his only valuable possession in the entire galaxy. Current market value, 15,000 credits. The auctioneer was getting impatient. No bids? Fine. Reduced opening, 10,000 credits. She eats little, works hard. Someone take this defective item off my hands. Jake's finger hovered over the screen. If he did this, he'd lose everything. His ship. His business. His independence. He'd be stranded on this station with nothing but the clothes on his back and a traumatized alien child who didn't even speak proper English. It was the stupidest thing he could possibly do. The girl looked up then, and her amber eyes met his through the crowd. There was no hope in them. No expectation of rescue. Just resignation. She'd already accepted her fate. Jake raised his hand. 20,000, he called out. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Steady. Certain. 20,000 credits, and I want the papers processed immediately. The plaza went silent. Even the slavers looked surprised. The auctioneer's multiple eyes focused on Jake. You have proof of funds, human? Jake held up his datapad, showing his accounts plus the ship's deed transfer authorization. Everything he owned in one transaction. The auctioneer's mouth split into something that might have been a smile. Sold. To the foolish human who apparently has more credits than sense. The gavel fell. And Jake Turner's old life ended right there in that moment. The paperwork took 3 hours. 3 hours of sitting in a grimy office while a bored clerk processed forms that made Jake want to throw up. Owner. Master. Property. Every document used those words. He had to sign his name next to them over and over again, each signature feeling like he was betraying something fundamental about who he was as a human being. The girl sat in the corner the whole time, silent now. She'd stopped crying, but that somehow felt worse. At least crying meant she still had fight left in her. This blank, empty stare meant something inside her had shut down completely. When the clerk finally stamped the last form, Jake stood up and walked over to her. She flinched. Just a small movement, but it cut through him like a knife. Hey, he said softly, crouching down so he wasn't looming over her. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. She didn't respond. Didn't even look at him. Her ears stayed flat against her head. Jake took a slow breath. Do you understand me? Do you speak English? A tiny nod. Barely visible. What's your name? Her mouth moved, but nothing came out at first. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, Myra. Myra, Jake repeated. That's a pretty name. I'm Jake. And I know you're scared right now, but I promise you, things are going to be different from now on. Okay? She still wouldn't meet his eyes. Jake didn't push it. He stood up and turned back to the clerk. What about my ship? The clerk didn't even look up. Already seized and listed for resale. You'll need to vacate within 2 hours. There's a colony transport leaving for human space in 4 hours. Gate 17. You can buy passage there. 4 hours. Jake had 4 hours to pack up 7 years of his life and figure out what the hell he was going to do next. The walk back to the Wandering Star was the longest of his life. Myra followed a few steps behind him, silent as a ghost. He kept glancing back to make sure she was still there. Each time, she'd freeze, like she was expecting to be yelled at for something. His ship. His beautiful, beat-up, constantly breaking down ship. He'd bought her cheap after the bankruptcy, fixed her up himself, learned every quirk and rattle. She wasn't much to look at, but she was his. Had been his. Now she belonged to whoever had the credits to buy her off the station. Jake climbed aboard and Myra hesitated at the bottom of the ramp. It's okay, he said. Come on. We need to grab my stuff before they lock us out. She climbed up slowly, looking around with wide eyes. Probably the first time she'd been on a ship as anything other than cargo. Jake had packed light when he first started this life, and he'd stayed that way. One duffel bag held all his clothes. Another had his tools, his datapads, a few photos from his old life. That was it. 7 years reduced to 2 bags. He pulled out a protein bar from his emergency supplies and handed it to Myra. Here. When's the last time you ate? She stared at the bar like it might be a trick. Go ahead, Jake said. It's yours. Chocolate flavored. Well, synthetic chocolate, but it's not terrible. Myra took it with trembling hands. She unwrapped it carefully, like she was afraid it might disappear. Then she took the tiniest bite possible. Her eyes went wide. Good? Jake asked. She nodded, and for just a second, one of her ears lifted slightly. It was the smallest thing. Barely noticeable. but it felt like a victory. Jake grabbed his bags and they headed to the transport station. The colony ship was massive compared to his little hauler, designed to carry hundreds of passengers to the outer colonies. Jake approached the ticket counter and checked the prices. His stomach dropped again. 2 tickets to Earth, the heart of human space, would cost him 1,800 credits. That left him with exactly 432 credits to his name. 400 credits to start a completely new life. The transport was packed. Refugees, mostly. Families fleeing war zones or economic collapse. Workers heading to colony worlds looking for opportunities. Everyone crammed into tiny berths stacked 3 high. Jake and Myra got assigned to berth section C, level 2. It was a metal shelf with a thin mattress, barely big enough for 1 person, let alone 2. Their neighbors were inches away on all sides. Myra climbed onto the berth and pressed herself into the far corner. Jake tossed his bags underneath and sat on the edge, careful to leave plenty of space between them. "This is going to be our home for the next 3 weeks, he said. "It's not great, but it's safe. Nobody's going to hurt you here. I promise." She didn't respond. Just stared at the wall. The ship departed 6 hours later. Jake felt every jump through hyperspace like a punch to the gut. He was really doing this. Really leaving behind everything he'd built. No ship. No business. No plan. Just him and a traumatized alien child who wouldn't even look at him. The first few days were brutal. Myra barely ate. Wouldn't speak. Flinched every time Jake moved too quickly. At night, she'd curl up into the tightest ball possible, as far from him as she could get on the tiny berth. He'd hear her crying sometimes, these tiny, muffled sounds that she tried so hard to hide. Jake started talking to her anyway. Not asking questions, just talking. About stupid things. About the stars they were passing. About Earth and what it was like. About the terrible food in the ship's galley. About anything and everything. She never responded. But after a few days, he noticed her ears would turn toward him when he spoke, even when her face stayed pointed away. On day 5, Jake was teaching her basic galactic common phrases, the proper ones instead of the broken pidgin the slavers had taught her. "My name is Myra," he said slowly. "Can you say that?" She stayed silent. "It's okay to talk," Jake said gently. "You're allowed to have a voice here." More silence. Then, so quiet he almost missed it, "My name is Myra." Jake's throat tightened. "That's perfect. Really good." On day 7, Jake woke up to find Myra wasn't pressed against the wall anymore. She was still on her side of the berth, but she'd moved a few inches closer during the night. On day 9, an older woman in the berth across from them started talking to Jake. Her name was Beth, a retired teacher heading to the frontier colonies to help set up schools. "That's a brave thing you did," she said quietly, nodding toward Myra. "Buying her freedom." Jake shrugged. Felt like the only choice. Beth smiled sadly. Most people wouldn't have made that choice. Most people would have kept walking. She paused, watching Myra curl up with the worn blanket Jake had given her. "You're a good man. But you know this galaxy will break your heart if you let it. You can't save everyone." "I know," Jake said. "But I could save her. So I did." Beth reached into her bag and pulled out a small stuffed animal, something that looked like a cross between a bear and a rabbit. "Give this to her. Every child should have something soft to hold on to." That night, Jake offered the toy to Myra. She stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. She held it against her chest, and for the first time since he'd met her, something that might have been the beginning of a smile touched her face. "Thank you," she whispered. 2 words. But they meant everything. Jake leaned back against the cold metal wall and closed his eyes. He had no ship. No money. No future planned out. But watching Myra clutch that toy like it was the most precious thing in the universe, he thought maybe, just maybe, he'd made the right choice after all. Even if it cost him everything. The alarm blared through the transport ship on day 12, jolting everyone awake. Red emergency lights flooded the berths as the captain's voice crackled over the speakers. "All passengers remain calm. We're experiencing engine difficulties and will be making an emergency stop at Frontier Station Osiris for repairs. Estimated delay, 72 hours. Jake sat up, his heart already racing. Something felt wrong. Myra was pressed against the wall again, her ears flat, eyes wide with fear. "It's okay," Jake said, trying to sound confident. "Just engine trouble. Happens all the time on these old transport ships." But his instincts were screaming at him. The same instincts that had kept him alive in the outer territories for 7 years. The ship docked at Osiris 4 hours later. It was a neutral station, one of those places where nobody asked too many questions and everyone minded their own business. The kind of place that attracted exactly the sort of people Jake wanted to avoid. Most passengers stayed on board, but Jake needed to stretch his legs. He'd been cooped up in that tiny berth for almost 2 weeks. "Come on," he said to Myra. "Let's take a walk. See what this place has to offer." She clutched her stuffed animal tighter but followed him. She'd started doing that over the past few days, following him like a shadow. It was progress, even if she still barely spoke. The station was busy. Merchants hawking goods from 100 different worlds. Travelers rushing between gates. The smell of a dozen different species food mixing together in the air. Jake kept Myra close, one hand hovering near her shoulder without actually touching her. They were passing a market stall when Jake noticed them. 3 figures in dark uniforms standing near the docking registry. Zenthari. The same species as the slavers from the auction station. Jake's blood went cold. "Keep walking," he muttered to Myra. "Don't look at them. Just stay close to me." But one of them had already seen her. Jake watched the Zenthari's multiple eyes focus on Myra, then reach for a data pad. He was checking something. "We need to go. Now." Jake grabbed his bag and started walking faster toward their docking gate. Myra struggled to keep up with his longer strides. They were 20 feet from the transport when a voice called out behind them. "You, human. Stop." Jake kept walking. Almost there. Just a few more steps. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder, spinning him around. 2 station security guards stood there, weapons on their belts. Behind them, the 3 Zenthari approached with smug expressions. "This human has stolen property," one of the Zenthari said in clicking, accented common. "That Felina belongs to the Zenthari Commerce Guild. We have documentation." Jake's mind raced. "I have documentation too. Legal purchase papers, processed and stamped. She's under my legal guardianship." The Zenthari held up his own data pad. "Your papers are fraudulent. This slave was illegally removed from guild custody. She belongs to Merchant Lord Vexthor of the Zenthari homeworld. We have the original purchase documents right here." It was a lie. Had to be. But Jake's stomach sank as he looked at the guards' faces. They didn't care about the truth. They cared about who paid them more. "Let me see those documents," Jake said, stalling for time. The Zenthari pulled the pad back. "Station security will handle verification. You and the property will come with us while this matter is resolved." Myra pressed against Jake's leg, trembling. He could feel her shaking through his pants. "How much?" Jake said quietly. "Excuse me? How much did they pay you?" Jake looked directly at the guards. "Because whatever it is, I can match it." One guard actually laughed. "You? You're staying in the cheap berths on a colony transport. You couldn't afford a proper bribe if your life depended on it." He was right. Jake had 400 credits to his name. That might buy him a decent meal. It wouldn't buy him justice. The Zenthari moved closer. "The station law is clear. Disputed property must be held pending investigation. You will surrender the Felina now, or we will take her by force." Jake shifted, putting himself between Myra and the aliens. "She's not property. She's a child." "She's inventory," the Zenthari snapped. "And you're a thief." Jake's options were running out. He could fight, but there were 5 of them and security on this station wouldn't hesitate to stun him. He could run, but where? They were on a space station. Nowhere to go. He needed help. Needed it desperately. But who could he possibly call? The answer came to him like a punch to the gut. There was one person. One person in the entire galaxy who had the money and connections to fix this. His brother. Jake hadn't spoken to Tyler in 4 years. Not since their parents' funeral, where they'd had that massive fight about Jake's failed life choices. Tyler had gone the corporate route, climbed the ladder, became a district administrator for one of Earth's biggest colonial development companies. Everything Jake had rejected. Tyler had called him a dropout and a loser. Jake had called him a sellout and a coward. They hadn't spoken since. But Tyler had money. And more importantly, Tyler had legal connections that could cut through station red tape. "I need to make a call," Jake said to the guards. "That's my right under neutral station law. You have to let me contact legal representation before any property seizure." The guards looked at each other, then shrugged. "Fine. 5 minutes. Make it quick." Jake pulled out his battered comm unit and scrolled through his contacts. Tyler's number was still there, flagged as do not call. He pressed it anyway. It rang 4 times. Jake was sure it would go to voicemail. Then a familiar voice answered. Jake? Is that really you? Hey, Tyler. Jake's voice cracked. I need your help. I know we haven't talked, and I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm in serious trouble and I don't have anyone else to call. Silence on the other end. Then, what kind of trouble? Jake explained everything in a rush. The auction. Myra. The emergency stop. The Zen3 with their fake documents. Tyler listened without interrupting. When Jake finished, there was a long pause. Let me get this straight, Tyler said finally. You spent everything you owned to buy a slave girl. Then you got stranded on a transport. And now the original slavers are trying to take her back. Yeah. That about covers it. Another pause. You're an idiot, Jake. You know that. I know. I can fix this. I have legal contacts on Osiris. I can get injunctions filed, proper documentation verified, probably get those Zen3 banned from the station for filing false claims. Relief flooded through Jake. Thank you. God, Tyler, thank you so much. I'll pay you back somehow. I don't know how, but... There's a condition, Tyler interrupted. Jake's relief turned to ice. What condition? You come home. To Earth. I can get you a position with my company. Junior administrator on one of the colony worlds. Steady pay. Benefits. Security. Everything you threw away when you decided to play space cowboy. Tyler. I'm not done. You take the job, you leave the transport life behind, and you let me set you up properly. No more scraping by on cargo runs. No more living hand to mouth in the outer territories. You grow up and join the real world. Everything in Jake wanted to scream no. That corporate life, that desk job existence, it was exactly what he'd run from. He'd rather be poor and free than comfortable and caged. But before he could answer, Myra tugged on his shirt. She looked up at him with those amber eyes, and he saw something there he hadn't seen before. Trust. She trusted him to protect her. You already gave up future for me, she whispered in her broken English, the longest sentence she'd managed. I not let you give up more. Jake's throat tightened. This brave, broken child was trying to protect him. After everything she'd been through, she was worried about him. He looked down at her, then back at the comm unit. Tyler was waiting for an answer. The Zen3 were watching with growing impatience. The guards were checking their weapons. Jake took a breath. Then another. And he made his choice. Tyler, he said slowly. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Jake looked down at Myra, at her small hand clutching his shirt, at the trust in her eyes that she was trying so hard to give him. Then he looked at the Zen3 slavers with their smug faces, at the bored security guards, at this whole corrupt system that treated children like merchandise. Something hardened inside him. Tyler, Jake said into the comm, his voice steady. Send your lawyers. File the injunctions. Do whatever legal magic you need to do. But I'm not taking your job. I'm not going back to Earth to sit in an office. That's not the deal. Then we don't have a deal, Tyler said flatly. Jake, be reasonable. You need this. Yeah, I do. And I'm asking you to help me anyway. As my brother. Not as a business transaction. Tyler's laugh was bitter. You never change, do you? Always got to do things the hard way. Always got to be the hero. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm just trying to do the right thing. The right thing. Tyler's voice rose. The right thing got you fired. Got you living in that rust bucket ship. Got you exactly where you are right now, broke and desperate. When are you going to learn? Jake felt the old anger rising, the same argument they'd had 1,000 times. But then Myra squeezed his hand. Just a small pressure. A reminder. You know what? Jake said quietly. You're right. Doing the right thing did cost me everything. And I'd do it again. Every single time. If that makes me an idiot, fine. I'm an idiot. But at least I can look at myself in the mirror. Time's up, one of the guards said. End the call. Tyler, Jake said urgently. Are you going to help or not? The line was silent for so long Jake thought his brother had hung up. Then Tyler sighed, long and tired. You're really not going to take the job? No. Even though it means staying broke? Even though you've got a kid to take care of now? Even though. Another pause. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. You know that. It runs in the family. Tyler actually laughed. A real one this time. Yeah. Yeah, it does. His voice changed, became businesslike. Put one of those guards on the line. Let me talk to their supervisor. And Jake? Don't do anything stupid in the next 5 minutes. For once in your life, just stand there and don't make things worse. Jake handed the comm to the nearest guard. It's for your boss. The guard looked annoyed but took it. He stepped away, listening. Jake watched his expression change from bored to alert to nervous. He was nodding a lot, saying yes, sir, and understood, sir. The Zen-3 noticed the change too. One of them moved closer. What is this? What are you doing, human? Jake just smiled. Calling in some help. You know how humans are. We get real touchy about people who hurt kids. The guard came back, his whole attitude different. You're free to go. Both of you. There's a legal hold on any seizure pending verification of documents. Could take weeks to sort out. The Zen-3 exploded in angry clicks. This is outrageous. We have proper documentation. This is theft. Take it up with Earth Colonial Administration, the guard said, sounding tired. They've just filed 17 different legal challenges and 3 formal complaints with station management. My supervisor says this whole thing is above my pay grade. You want the property, go through proper channels. The Zen-3 turned to Jake, his multiple eyes blazing with fury. You think you've won? You've only delayed the inevitable. We will get her back. The guild always collects what belongs to them. Jake stepped forward, putting himself nose to nose with the alien. Well, nose to mandible. Whatever. She doesn't belong to anyone, Jake said, his voice low and hard. And if you come near her again, you're going to find out just how protective humans get when you threaten their family. For a moment, the Zen-3 looked like he might actually attack. But then he glanced at the guards, at the gathering crowd of curious onlookers, and stepped back. This isn't over, he hissed. Yeah, it is, Jake said. You just don't know it yet. The Zen-3 stalked off, his companions following. The guards dispersed. And Jake stood there, his heart hammering, wondering what the hell he'd just done. Jake. Myra's small voice broke through his thoughts. What happens now? Good question. Jake looked down at her, at this child who'd already been through so much. Then he looked at his comm unit where a message from Tyler was already coming through. But Jake wasn't alone. As he stood there, he realized a crowd had formed. Not a hostile crowd. Other passengers from their transport. People who'd been watching the confrontation. Beth, the retired teacher, pushed her way forward. That was incredibly brave, she said. And incredibly stupid. But mostly brave. Thanks. I think. A younger woman stepped up next. I'm posting this to the network, she said, holding up her data pad. Everyone needs to see what just happened here. Those Zen-3 bastards can't be allowed to get away with this. Wait, what? Jake blinked. What are you posting? Everything. The whole confrontation. I recorded it all. It's going up on the Galactic News Network right now. I wouldn't do that, Jake started to say, but she was already typing furiously. An older man, a merchant by the look of him, nodded approvingly. Good. People need to know. The Zen-3 have been getting away with this garbage for too long. Time someone stood up to them. Within minutes, Jake's comm was buzzing. Messages were flooding in. Not just from Tyler, but from people he didn't even know. Other humans on the station. Humans on other stations. The video was spreading fast. One message caught his eye. It was from someone named Nicole Webb, attorney at law, Human Colonial Justice Project. Mr. Turner, I saw the video of your confrontation. My organization provides free legal representation for human citizens involved in anti-slavery cases. We would like to represent you and the minor in your custody. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. We will ensure she stays free. Pro bono. No charges. Jake stared at the message. Then another one came in. And another. Lawyers. Activists. Even a few politicians. All offering help. What's happening? Myra asked, looking at his comm in confusion. I think. Jake scrolled through the messages, his mind reeling. I think we just started something. His comm rang. Tyler again. You seeing this? His brother said without preamble. Yeah. I don't understand. I just stood up to some slavers. Why is this going viral? Because you're human, you idiot, Tyler said, but there was something like pride in his voice. And humans? We don't let things slide. Especially not when kids are involved. That video is everywhere. Every human station, every human colony, every human ship in the galaxy. You know what's trending right now on Earth? Not stood. The human who said no. Jake looked around at the crowd. More people were gathering. Humans, mostly, but other species too. They were watching him and Myra with something that looked like approval. Or maybe hope. There's more, Tyler continued. The Zenthari Commerce Guild just lost their trading license on 6 human stations. There's talk of sanctions. The Earth ambassador to the Galactic Council is giving a speech right now about the need for stricter anti-slavery enforcement. This thing is bigger than you, Jake. Way bigger. I just wanted to help one kid, Jake said quietly. Yeah, well, you did. But you also reminded every human out here why we left Earth in the first place. To build something better. To be better. Tyler paused. I'm proud of you, little brother. Even if you are a stubborn idiot. Jake's throat was tight. Thanks, Tyler. The lawyers will handle everything from here. The Zenthari won't touch her. Hell, they probably can't even dock at a human station anymore without getting arrested. You're safe. Jake ended the call and looked down at Myra. She was staring at him with something like awe in her eyes. You did that, she whispered. For me? Yeah, Jake said. For you. Why? It was a simple question. But the answer was just as simple. Because it was right. And because. Jake knelt down so they were eye level. Because you deserved someone to fight for you. Every kid does. Myra's eyes filled with tears. But this time, they weren't tears of fear. She dropped her stuffed animal and threw her arms around Jake's neck, hugging him tight. Jake hugged her back, this small, brave child who'd survived so much. And around them, the crowd erupted in cheers. 6 months had passed since the incident on Osiris Station, and Jake still wasn't used to being recognized in public. Hey, you're that guy, someone would say at the grocery store, or the fuel depot, or just walking down the street. The one from the video. Jake would smile politely, say thanks, and try to move on. Fame wasn't something he'd wanted. He just wanted a quiet life where Myra could be safe and happy. They'd ended up on New Vancouver, a mid-sized colony world that specialized in agricultural exports. It wasn't glamorous. The housing was basic, the entertainment limited, and the weather was either too hot or too cold with nothing in between. But it was part of human space, protected by Earth's laws, and most importantly, it was home. Jake worked as a shuttle pilot now, ferrying workers between the surface and the orbital processing stations. It was honest work. Boring, repetitive, but steady. He got paid every 2 weeks like clockwork. Had benefits. Even had a retirement account that he was actually contributing to for the first time in his life. It wasn't exploring the galaxy. It wasn't the freedom of running his own ship. But it was enough. More than enough, actually, when he came home each evening to find Myra curled up on the couch doing her homework. How was school? Jake asked, dropping his bag by the door. Myra looked up from her data pad, her ears perking up. Good. Mrs. Patterson says my English is getting much better. I only made 3 mistakes on the grammar test. Only 3? That's amazing. Jake meant it. 6 months ago, Myra could barely string together a full sentence. Now she was reading at grade level and even making jokes. And Tommy invited me to his birthday party next week. Can I go? Please? Her tail swished with excitement. Jake smiled. Tommy was a human kid in her class, loud and energetic and completely accepting of the fact that his new friend had fur and a tail. Of course you can go. We'll need to get him a present though. Any ideas? Myra's face scrunched up in thought. He really likes those model spaceships. Maybe one of those? Perfect. We'll go shopping this weekend. They'd settled into a routine over the months. Jake would make dinner, usually something simple because he was a terrible cook. Myra would complain about it but eat it anyway. They'd watch shows together, or Jake would help with homework, or they'd just talk about their days. It was normal. Beautifully, wonderfully normal. But the past still haunted them sometimes. Jake woke up that night to the sound of crying. Soft, muffled sobs coming from Myra's room. It had been weeks since the last nightmare. He'd hoped they were done. He padded quietly to her door and knocked gently. Myra? You okay? Go away, came the shaky reply. Not happening. Can I come in? Silence. Then, okay. Jake opened the door. Myra was curled up in her bed, clutching the stuffed animal Beth had given her on the transport. Her face was wet with tears. Jake sat on the edge of the bed. Bad dream? She nodded, not looking at him. I dreamed I was back there. At the auction. And you walked away. You didn't buy me. Nobody did. Jake's heart broke a little. That didn't happen. I'm here. You're here. You're safe. But what if you change your mind? Myra's voice was small. What if you decide I'm too much trouble? What if you send me away? Hey, look at me. Jake waited until her amber eyes met his. That's never going to happen. Never. You're stuck with me now, kid. For as long as you want. Promise. Promise. Cross my heart. He made the gesture that human kids did, and Myra tried to copy it, her small hand moving across her chest. I had a home before, she whispered. On Andara Colony. I had a mom and a dad and a little brother. The raiders took me when I was walking home from school. I tried to fight them but I was too small. I couldn't. Her voice broke. Jake carefully reached out and put a hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch anymore when he did that. I know. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. It wasn't fair and it wasn't right. Do you think they're still looking for me? My real family? The question gutted him. Jake had tried to find information about Myra's birth family through official channels, but the records from the Andara raids were a mess. Thousands of people displaced, hundreds missing, and that was 2 years ago. The trail was cold. I hope so, Jake said honestly. And if they are, I'll help you find them. I promise. Myra was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised him. But if we don't find them, you're my family too. Right? Jake had to swallow hard past the lump in his throat. Yeah, I am. She smiled a little and wiped her eyes. Okay. Good. You want me to stay until you fall asleep? I'm not a baby, Myra said with as much dignity as a 10-year-old could manage. Then, quieter, but yes please. Jake stayed, sitting in the chair by her bed until her breathing evened out and she drifted off. He watched her sleep, this brave kid who'd survived things no child should ever have to face, and felt that familiar mix of pride and terror that came with being responsible for another person's life. The next day was Saturday, and Myra had a school project due Monday. It was for her social studies class. The assignment was to write about heroes. I'm writing about you, Myra announced over breakfast. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. What? No. Myra, pick someone else. Pick a real hero. Like Dr. King, or Malala, or any of the people who actually did important things. You did something important, Myra insisted. You saved me. That's different. That was just? I just did what anyone would do. But they didn't. Myra's voice was firm. All those other people at the auction. They walked away. You didn't. Mrs. Patterson says that's what makes a hero. Not having special powers or anything. Just choosing to do the right thing when it's hard. Jake didn't know what to say to that. So he just said, okay. If that's what you want to write about. Myra worked on her essay all weekend, typing away on her datapad with fierce concentration. She wouldn't let Jake read it until it was done. Monday afternoon, Jake got a call at work. From Myra's teacher. Mr. Turner? This is Helen Patterson. I wanted to talk to you about Myra's essay. Jake's stomach dropped. Is something wrong? Did she plagiarize or? No, nothing like that. It's just. Mrs. Patterson paused. Would you mind if I shared her essay with the class? And possibly with some other teachers? I think it's important. I think other kids need to hear this story. Sure? I guess? What did she write? She wrote about kindness. About standing up. About how one person's choice can change everything. Mrs. Patterson's voice was warm. Mr. Turner, I've been teaching for 20 years, and this is one of the most moving things I've ever read from a student. You should be very proud. When Myra came home that afternoon, she was practically glowing. I got an A+. And Mrs. Patterson cried. She actually cried when she read it. Can I read it now? Jake asked. Myra handed over her datapad, suddenly shy. Jake read the essay. It was titled What Heroes Really Look Like. Myra wrote about the auction, about being scared, about thinking nobody cared. Then she wrote about Jake. Not as some perfect savior, but as a regular person who made a choice. She wrote about how that choice cost him everything, but how he never complained about it. Never made her feel like a burden. The last paragraph hit him hardest. My friend Tommy asked me what a hero looks like. I told him heroes don't wear capes or have superpowers. Sometimes they're just tired people who work long hours and make terrible dinners and tell bad jokes. Sometimes they're just people who see someone who needs help and decide to help them, even when it's hard. Even when it costs them everything. My hero is named Jake, and he gave up his spaceship to buy my freedom. But more than that, he gave me a home. He gave me a family. He gave me a future. And that's what real heroes do. They don't save the whole world. They just save one person and make that person's world worth living in. Jake had to put the data pad down. His eyes were burning. Is it okay? Myra asked nervously. Did I write it good? Yeah, Jake managed. Yeah, kid. You wrote it perfect. That weekend, they went shopping for Tommy's birthday present. Then they stopped for ice cream, because Myra had discovered ice cream 2 months ago and now wanted it constantly. They sat in the park, watching other families play, and for the first time since all this started, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Jake. Myra said around a mouthful of chocolate chip. Can I learn to fly shuttles? Like you? Maybe when you're older. Why? Because I want to help people. Like you helped me. Maybe I could fly medical supplies to colonies that need them. Or rescue people who are in trouble. She looked up at him with those bright amber eyes. Is that dumb? That's not dumb at all. That's actually a really beautiful dream. Will you teach me? Jake looked at this kid, this survivor, this bright light who'd come into his life in the darkest moment and somehow made everything make sense. He thought about his old dreams, about exploring the galaxy alone, about the freedom he'd given up. He didn't miss any of it. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I'll teach you. When you're old enough, we'll get you in a simulator. Start with the basics. Who knows? Maybe you'll be a better pilot than me. Myra grinned, showing slightly pointed teeth. I'll definitely be better than you. Hey now, let's not get cocky. They finished their ice cream and headed home. Just a regular afternoon for a regular family in a regular colony town. Nothing special. Nothing remarkable. Except Jake had learned something over these 6 months. Sometimes the extraordinary moments aren't the big dramatic ones. They're the quiet ones. The homework help. The nightmare comfort. The ice cream in the park. He'd given up his ship, his freedom, his old life. And in return, he'd gotten something infinitely more valuable. He'd gotten a reason to wake up in the morning. A reason to work hard. A reason to be better. He'd gotten a daughter.